Hi everyone, and welcome to this week's Movie Night Hangout. So tonight we'll go behind the scenes of the movie The Truman Show, looking not only at what it reflects from our society, but also the mind manifestations that some of us might not be aware of. And with us we have two Estonians from Austria, Aldin and Michelle. Hi guys.
Hi.
Hi, Joanna.
And my name is Joanna, and before we start, I would just like to remind our viewers that you can ask your questions or send your comments via the Q&A box here and on YouTube or the Google Plus, actually. So feel free to do so, and we will cover those throughout the Hangout. Let's start now, and for those of you who haven't watched this movie or watched many years ago, The Truman Show is a movie from 1998, and it is about a man unknowingly lives in a reality show throughout his whole life, and it is actually based in one of the episodes of the science fiction Twilight Zone. And then we follow the escaping journey of Truman from his constructed reality to his true life, so as a true man. The whole society around him participates in keeping him oblivious to reality and in bringing enormous success and revenue to the show and advertisers. In my case, I watched this movie many years ago, and then recently I watched it again, but this time with the input of my own process, the Desteni process, the Desteni material, and my understanding of the world. So, Michelle, let's start with you today and tell me one point of understanding that you have probably found now that you weren't able to find before you started the process.
Yes, okay. One thing I found from watching The Truman Show was how Truman was trying to find answers. All these things were happening to him, and he wanted to know what is going on. And so when he started to ask questions, people in his world were trying to like steer him and direct him in a certain way. They were, saying to him, oh, you're fine here, and he wanted to explore the world. So I saw it in terms of how me walking my process of understanding my mind, how the mind will try to steer me in a different direction. I will try and sit down and write, and then all of a sudden I'll get all these things that I need to do. They'll start coming up in my mind, and I just want to focus and write. So I saw this in relation to how the mind will kind of start bringing up all these things and will try to direct you. So I found that interesting in seeing also The Truman Show, how the people in his world, almost like little thoughts in his head, were trying to direct him in different ways.
That's a very cool point. I could definitely see that in me as well. Still today in my process, and it's funny to see that manifested in the Truman Show, but it actually with elements of his reality trying to push him away to not look further. Aldin, would you like to give it a go on this one?
Yes, of course. I actually agree with Michelle, where I saw the point where how the mind really tries to steer you away from finding the answer, or even taking that step to investigate that point. How like all these thoughts or emotions or backchats come up that kind of just pull you away from it, telling you like fears or what might happen or what you might lose, because that's a big point too, where like fear of change or fear of loss comes up. And I saw that in the Truman Show, where his best friend, he always talked him around things. He questioned his approaches and where he wanted to explore the world and sail to Fiji, for example, and how his wife, the woman that he married there, how she always tried to steer him away with, for example, food or with like a romance. And yeah, this is also a point I found for me, as Michelle said, where you see a point in you or that you need to change, that you become aware of, but the initial step you take, all these doubts and fears come up all of a sudden in your mind. It's like It's like you pass a certain, like, I don't know, like a line in the mind, and then like all these fireworks get set off, and the mind just bombards you with like all fears to keep you just away from just going there. And most of the time you probably will not step beyond that and will be pulled back if you don't really beyond that certain point to start investigating and start changing.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And it's what I noticed, and how this movie supported me was to see that so like in your face. This is exactly how it works in process. When you start and when you keep on writing, and the mind starts shouting at you, like putting all those fears, and like we saw when Truman was trying to get away and everything was coming on his way suddenly out of nothing. And also, all like we can actually look at the poster, like there was this poster of the fear of to promote the fear of flying with an airplane, saying like, don't try even to go there, don't, because something bad is going to happen. And what I find as well is that we do have these things in our society. It is actually promoted, very subtle sometimes, how in our education, in the way we are brought up, is that you always have those conditions, and you try to do something. It's like, oh, watch out, you're gonna fall, or like these points come up very often. So, how did you guys?
Hello, are you guys there?
Yeah, I think just my bandwidth was just a little bit bad now, so my movie went out, but my film went video, but you should be able to hear me, right? Can you hear me, guys? Oops, let me just move this. Michelle, can you hear me?
Hello?
Yes, Alin, perfect.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Sorry, I think I'm just having some.
Sorry, my connection's kind of bad over here.
Okay, cool. So I think we're all here. It's just my image might be a bit like with very low bandwidth, but we're getting it sorted. So I was just saying that in your process, when you first started, how did it change in your own reality? Meaning, suddenly you start investigating your mind. You start realizing, well, there's something here that it's not okay. I need to think, to sort my mind, to face myself. How was it to get out there, like facing your reality, either with your family or your friends? Could you like to give me some input on that, Aldin?
Yes, for me, for example, when I started the process, I initially went into this point of everything is fake, where I kind of secluded myself, and I kind of went into like a deep depression in the beginning, because I thought like, what's the point of living anymore? Because I could like actually see how my mind was directing me and controlling me with, you know, you name it, emotions, feelings, thoughts, etc. But then when I actually realized, you know, like there is no point to be in this depression, and I actually got to do something actually to change in order to see some change in myself and my world. And when I actually started doing that, you know, you name it, like the writing, the self-forgiveness, and then actually doing this self-corrective application in real time back then, whenever I faced a point then in real life, I could see like the people in my environment, they made like certain comments to, or made fun of certain things to try to pull me back into that old point. In school, and point of like being more shy and speaking up and standing up for myself. And when I did that, it's like my friends, they make like sneaky remarks and made fun of me, and I could see how my mind would take these comments or remarks to try to pull me back, like with bringing up a lot of thoughts or you know, you're not good enough, and look, you didn't change, nothing changed, you're still the same. So I actually got pulled back a few times into the point until I finally realized that what my mind is actually using, which is trying to manipulate me to get me back into the old point or habit. And once I stood through that and pushed through that, actually, the mind through time, for every time applying these corrective applications, silenced more and more until it almost got to like a standstill, so to speak, where if such things come up again now, like in thoughts or trying to put me back into like these points of shyness or self-consciousness, it's like as simple as taking an in-breath and an out-breath and saying no, and just reminding myself of the whole process I walked and what I have to do, and then I just do it, and you know, I stabilize within that point.
Very cool, Alden.
Hope that
That's
answers
a great
the question.
Absolutely, and it brings new points into the discussion, which is great. As you were mentioning, like the mind starts bringing you back, but it's actually, we are doing that to ourselves. And that was something that I have been realizing, is that how can I use my own mind as an indicator of my process? So if I am in my process of changing and I receive a comment, if there is self-judgment within me, if I actually like go back in my own mind, then that's an indicator I'm not yet stable on that point. So what do I need, which point do I need to work on in order to start leaving these words? So that's a very cool. Thanks, Alden. That's very interesting to see how this movie, and using movies, we can understand a little bit more of how this process works and walk it.
Exactly, agree.
So, Michelle, do you want to add anything from your experience in terms of facing patterns in your life and now in the process of changing, especially something new that you noticed? So those people are now starting to walk the process, some of the resistance they may face, like Truman faced when he was trying to escape.
Yeah, sure. Truman, he had people telling him, you know, stay where you are, it's fine here. And I could see it in terms of just my own mind, where I have these, or had some certain self-definitions where I didn't believe I could do certain things. But I mean, Truman persevered. He wanted to get out into the world, and I truly believe in that. Like, when you persevere and you push through and you challenge yourself, you can really discover a lot about yourself. I mean, I didn't think I'd be sitting here 2 years from now, because I define myself as a really shy, quiet person. So it's kind of like cool as you walk your process and you start challenging yourself to see, you know, how far you can go. And it's cool to see, like, I don't know, just to discover new things about yourself.
Great. Yeah, I would say that that is the case of probably most of us that have been walking the Destiny process, and nowadays we have so many hangouts which we wouldn't do at the beginning of the process. So that's very cool. And how, in my case, I have been looking at the self-judgments and work on those so that I get to know myself to a point of self-stability, to then be able to develop up to my fullest potential and then be able to give back, so to assist others as we were assisted. So I'm just now going to look back at a point of having this, when suddenly the world starts falling apart. And that was what the case in Truman was. Like, everything he knew was just like, wait a second, nothing of this is real. What a fakeness. And nowadays, when I look at the world and I see, especially looking at the media and advertising industry, it's actually, we see that there is so much still to be done in our world to bring a level of transparency so that we can actually see, okay, people are being honest. What exists in this world is actually good for us. No one is trying to sell us bad things, for example. So from your perspective, what would you say for people that are now, for instance, going to watch the Truman Show after watching this hangout? What would be your suggestion in terms of, okay, when you watch this, bring this to yourself and see how you analyze it. is there anything that you would like to suggest to viewers so that they start discovering themselves through this movie, for example? Aldin, would you like to give it a go?
Yes, sure. There's definitely like a lot of things you can bring back to yourself. What comes up right away is like the point of advertisement in the movie, and in connection to the real world, where advertisement is once you understand it, you will see how it's literally like a direct programming to steer you into a certain direction in the system and have you a certain mindset and adapt you to a certain way of living and behavior. I could see that, for example, in advertisement back then, in watching movies, and where you see, like, for example, in movies and shows, for example, like the Game of Thrones, like all these males with like big muscles and like this tan skin and you know, like these super complexions and stuff like that, but you actually you pursue that, you want that, and you go on a process, an internal and external, so to speak, emotionally and out there buying products to try to get the same thing. But you actually don't realize that, like, how these guys look, or females look in movies or magazines or TV shows, is actually like scripted and constructed to the very minute detail for a lot of hard work, a lot of certain lightnings, changes, software program alterations and stuff like that, and special effects and sound effects to make the final product that gets you then eventually in the mind, that you try to pursue this perfection. And I could see that also in the Truman Show, where his wife, this one scene where Truman was questioning his reality, and his wife was like kind of like advertising with this baking product or something like that, and how she immediately like steered him away, or tried to steer him away from his determination to find the answers, or to keep investigating to find the truth. Yeah, I hope that answers the question.
That's a very cool point, because we see in our society sometimes it's not so much like actually looking at, okay, this is what they're showing to me. All right, do I need to accept that as who I want to be? What is that I am accepting and allowing in my own life? Do I want to pursue like a body that I don't have? So why don't I live in the body that I have, and I enjoy myself? So there is exactly many points as well that I think people can do as a takeaway from this hangout, in terms of not being so influenced and affected, kind of like a powerlessness of being bombarded by advertising. And
right. If I can just add a point.
Go for it.
How I saw it also is like how the advertisement or companies are actually stigmatizing certain body images to create these feelings of, you know, certain body type is like wrong or bad, and you need to pursue this constructed perfection that they show on television. It's like they create already the perfect body, so to speak, while there in actuality there is none. You know, everybody is like different, and creating that belief and that feeling associated of hatred and something is wrong with me is really not cool, of course. But this is definitely something one can bring back to one's attention and awareness whenever one faces this point, to bring it back to yourself and say, you know, this is what they show me in an advertisement is constructed and it's not real, actually, you know, and they stigmatize certain body types or shapes, while in actuality it's nothing wrong with it. You know, it's actual physical matter, substance, how it is.
Yeah, Michelle, were you adding something?
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of add on to what Alden was saying. What I suggest people to look at after they watch the movie is to start, you know, questioning the advertising system, the world, you know, because we're constantly bombarded with images and just words saying, you know, this is like the best product, this is the best product, and what I found is one really has to do like investigation, just reading on and education, and so you know we're getting these everything kind of thrown in our face, and we're just kind of easily accepting it as is instead of just questioning and just seeing if this is like the best thing for me, if we should continue. So yeah, that's what I wanted to add.
Yeah, cool. And we just got a comment here, and it was about bringing this point into self-honesty, and that's what we use as our guiding principle. And the comment was specifically about at some point in the process is like you see that there's something wrong here, but then there's this perception that there isn't. Everything is okay. Everyone is happy. This is the formula for you to be happy. So why are you not happy? And then you sell this. We are sold constantly these images of happiness, and then we ask ourselves, but how come I'm not like the happiest person in the world if I have all of this? Obviously, there is something lacking, and that's something is actually our own selves, to our own lives, and to honor it and to live to the best of what we can be as human beings. And I actually read a comment at some point about this movie when I was investigating for the Hangout, and it was saying that the American dream and the Truman's world serves as an attempt to keep him happy and ignorant. And Michelle, do you see that still in our world, even though this movie was like from 1998? Michelle, I think you're muted.
Yes.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
I was just saying that there was this comment that I was reading, that I read before the Hangout, saying that the American dream concept in Truman Show serves as an attempt to keep him happy and ignorant. Even though this movie was from 1998, how do you see this still reflected in our society?
I see it, yeah, well, I see it as constantly we're being entertained, and that's kind of like what's keeping everybody happy. But it's not really fulfilling what we would really like out of life, which are words that we haven't lived ourselves. So the American dream, I mean, what is the American dream? I mean, we got immigrants from Mexico coming in, and we have problems going on in the States. So it's just I think that what's going on in this world is we're just, you know, we're becoming a bit too consumed in our own entertainment and distractions, that we're not really trying to see how we can make ourselves in this world a better place.
Yeah, I relate to that. So now that we looked at the society and how the movie manifests that perfection that only exists in our minds, but it's actually not real, and it's not what brings us the fulfillment. Now I want us to look at the inner self, or the mind manifestation, I would say, that this movie shows. And looking at this episode, which I could relate to in my own life, which was Truman's fear of the water. And you ask yourself, like, why is he so fearful of water? And then we see that there's this memory. There's this memory of him in water sailing, and his father dies in an accident. And from that moment on, he became with this fear of water, and he didn't even decide, and he couldn't go back to the water. Obviously, in the film, we realize that this was actually a fabrication of the producer, so that he would never be keen to leave his own island, wherever he was living. So, how do you guys how do you see how your fears that we create in ourselves, becomes such a limitation in our lives? Aldin, would you like to go ahead with this one?
Sure, it's a big topic because I see it everywhere. It's like the mind is like the master creator of bringing up memories and storing them and holding them and using them against self. I have been facing, and I'm still facing, a lot of like points where where memories of the past just appear in the mind when I go out in the world and face the same points from the past, where it tries to lure me back, as I said before, into the old habit or pattern. And as I mentioned before, once I realized that what my mind is actually doing with the memories, which is actually using them as a very effective control tool to manipulate me back into certain points of habits from the past that it was satisfied with, so to speak, is that once you apply through this understanding and you stand through it, through the memories, and don't allow them to affect you, you will uncover like dimensions and roles about yourself, and you will actually connect more with yourself. And I would say that is where the real happiness will come, because as you said, and as Michelle said too, is like the advertisement industry and movies and etc. are constantly bombarding us with images of happiness to create that external happiness. It's like a pursuing an external happiness instead of realizing the lack of happiness, so to speak, is coming from the disconnect from self. And back to the point of memories, I kind of drifted there a little bit off. From my understanding, memories are one of the most limiting like constructs that the mind can use against you, because it will store every point that it sees that you're kind of like shaky in or weak, and it will bring it up again in every situation where it can apply to do everything in its might to just keep you unchanged in a certain point.
Yeah. And like in Truman, at some point, he was actually, when he was speaking with his mom, and she was saying, you know, I've never blamed you for your father's death. But in fact, what we haven't yet kind of figured out, at least I haven't before I found Destiny, was like how to deal with memories. How can you actually sit down, start writing in a very structured way to support you and assist you, so that you understand what are the mind patterns that you're keeping holding on to validating those self-definitions, as Michelle also mentioned. And Michelle, one thing that I wanted to ask you, and this comes from a comment that I received from a Destonian, saying, by breaking through the fear, we will free ourselves from the pre-programmed design. How can you relate this to the movie, like this pre-programmed fear design that you see there and probably in your own life?
Yeah, with fear in general, I find that the best way to really break out of it is to understand it. And that's what Truman also wanted. He wanted to understand his world, what was going on. And that's why he was asking questions. And so when we walk our process, we start questioning our own fears, seeing where they come from. And I mean, Truman had quite a traumatic childhood experience with the boat and his father drowning. And so, you know, such things, you know, we also can have traumatic experiences in our lives. And it really, and so what we do is we first, you know, understand it, and then we walk the process of self-forgiveness and finding ways to release ourselves from the past. And yeah, and so Truman, I mean, I guess his father came back. He didn't really die, so but so yeah, anyways, with fear and pre-programmed fear, we could break through our fears. We just first have to understand it, and we have to find a way to walk through it. And that's where the Destiny I process comes in, which I find to be really cool because it's structured. You get a buddy who can assist you. So you really do get to learn how to walk through such things.
Yeah, I also relate to that. And it was so interesting to have a movie showing you that. It's like I mean, once you are walking, it makes sense. It's like, oh, that's what happens, and that's what would happen to me. I would probably, well, if we are, so some of our limitations and very specific ones like phobias and other limitations that we impose into ourselves come from those memories and those traumas that we haven't given ourselves a chance to look at. And then it can limit us in our adulthood to extent that it kind of goes beyond our control, and we just have to slow down and start digging into our own process. So I was having a look at this this notion that was a part of the comment that we received earlier on, in terms of saying that everything is okay as it is. Sometimes we have this idea in these Hollywood movies, is like, and they lived happy ever after, and it gives this apparent illusion. And I wanted to ask you, how does the journey to life with the Destiny tools actually empowers you to not be fearful of standing up for yourselves? Alden, would you like to give it a go?
Yes, of course. I would say through the Destiny I process, you actually have tangible and real tools that you can really find nowhere, and that I couldn't find nowhere before, that give you that actual entrance, so to speak, for what do I actually need to do, and what is the actual real steps that are going to work for me to change a certain point or to find out the truth of a certain point. And writing, self-forgiveness, self-corrective applications, breathing, you mentioned it, are like these tools. They're actual physical, applicable tools that really work. It's not like some speaking, it's writing and speaking that goes hand in hand with actual physical movement, and that is why it works. That is the key from what I found. And combining like the trinity, so to speak, of writing and self-forgiveness and corrective applications is really it's like the key for change. And this is what I found through the Destiny I process, is that it, as said, it gives you actual real tools that you apply that will lead you, or through which you will lead yourself into the truth, into the change that you desire, that you want, that you see is necessary.
Oops, sorry, I was muted now. Michelle, would you like to add anything to this before we go to one of the questions we just got?
Sure. Yeah, I just wanted to add that what you can also, as you walk your process and you start to investigate your fears, you then see how you're responsible, how you created your fears, or how you're accepting and allowing them to continue. So once you see that you're responsible or that you created them, you then can find a way to walk out of that.
Yeah, bringing the point of self-responsibility and realizing, look, this is my mind. This is the mind that I need to sort out. I'm not going to sort out other people's minds. And as you said earlier, perseverance is very important, to keep on walking and not be pushed back, and to stand up, because, well, eventually sometimes we miss a breath, we do a mistake, but then we learn from it, and we keep on walking until it becomes us, our living correction, and we recreate ourselves. So yeah. I'm just going to select the question we just got from Marlon. She's going to show up now on the right side. So regarding the memory of the father as fear of the water, which is similar to trauma-based mind control, we essentially condition our own limitation, and in Truman's case, conditioning him not to see the limits of the stage reality. So Marlon asks, can you relate to this fear limit? So guys, so in terms of in your own lives, can you relate to this, how fear has limited you from doing something in your own lives?
May I go? Okay,
Never
cool.
happened?
Yeah. Oh yeah, of course. I can see it in where I was having a fear of socializing with people and getting to know them, and even just having eye contact with people, and it was based on a traumatic experience or experiences I had with the past of being bullied or called certain names due to back then in puberty having had severe acne. And that imprinted into my mind and into my body, where it became a very traumatic experience, so to speak, from which I actually, from the moment of that experience of these events, in a very short time, I secluded myself and I stayed most of the time at home, and I didn't want to pursue and had the fear of pursuing any social contacts and even hanging out with best friends that I had back then. So that's what I can share in terms of like a real extreme fear, limitation that I had. And once I walked through this, through the Destiny process, for applying forgiveness and writing and getting to understand what really happened back then, what could I have done differently that would have turned into a whole different scenario, and taking that responsibility to change now, since I have, giving myself the power of realizing, hey, I can change this, and let me investigate the memory and what happened back then. Where did I give in? What did I do? Or what could I have done differently that would have totally had a different outcome right now for me? And let me apply this right now, because it's certainly not too late. Otherwise, I will always keep existing in this point, and I don't want that. And once I did that, I started very slowly introducing myself back to the society, so to speak, starting with more eye contacts, walking on the street, talking to teachers, to schoolmates, etc., until it developed today to this stage where I actually initiate conversations with people, where I actually walk up to them to get to know them, to understand what they're doing, and to form social contacts and relationships and so on. So I'd say that's... Hello, you guys there?
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry, for some moment I stopped hearing you, but I can hear you now. Michelle, is there any fear point that you would like to share with us so that we can relate to how fear has limited you somehow, and how did you face the point to correct yourself?
Yeah, I used to be really fearful of some family members, and it got to the point where I completely blocked them on Facebook. I didn't, want to talk to them anymore, and I realized it was because they were showing me things that I was still allowing to exist in, and because they're so vocal and they essentially had these tough minds, I was quite sensitive at the time, and I didn't want to take that. But then as I started to walk my process and I started to question myself and some of the things they said, I started to realize that, they're vocal, but I have to take care of my reactions. And so eventually, when I saw them again, I didn't really have that fear anymore. I was able to more comfortably express myself around them, because I saw that I was holding on to these reactions and these beliefs, and they were actually challenging me. So they were actually a gift.
Yeah, that's what I noticed as well. And this goes in line with the new question we got. It was actually a comment from Anna Briggs Thompson, and where she was saying that something else cool about Truman's example with the water memory is that it actually was what he needed to break free. He had to go through what he feared the most until you actually found out that he was living on this staging environment. And as such, we can use our minds constructively. So thank you very much, Anna and Marlon, for your comments. And that actually assisted me. And it is a point that I walked also with the assistance of the ICAF interviews on the fear and phobias. And it's funny that one single fear, which I thought was just a fear, like there was this fear of me, like fear of dark, and I would just label it as it, and I was accepting it. And when I start walking, which I'm still walking, there are many points that I realize that I project into darkness. And if I bring those points into myself, I realize that there is a whole world of behind the fear that I was avoiding to face. And one of them was the fear of being alone. But it's funny because for me to sit down and write, it actually helps for me to be alone. So if I don't face this fear and the fear of also the darkness, which to face also those points of darkness within me, then I don't get to know me, and I don't break free of my own self-limitation. And the point of actually sitting down and writing for as many hours as I need, then a lot of things I wouldn't understand within me so far. So
Cool.
Thanks guys for those comments and for sharing your experience. It's so interesting how we can learn from each other and apply those same corrections in our own selves. So I was now looking at coming back to the external world. So we analyze how the fear within us consumes us and kind of puts us in this anxious state that we are not even able to like express ourselves. And I was also looking at how this is actually manifested in the world. So all these fears that we have been seeing in the media, like fears in terms of the fight against terror, the propaganda against Middle East, then all the fears that are fooled in children's minds in terms of even the fear of darkness and things like that. Can you see how this pattern plays out in the society where you live? Like, let's say in Austria, like how people that, for example, stay so long in front of the TV and get all these fears and they're not able to or educated to direct this. What would you say in this external world?
If I get your question right,
Sorry, I was a bit messy, I think.
to describe like how I see in the real world, like in Austria, how fears are being created in people.
Well, it can be how you see that it actually is limiting us from getting to know even another country just because it is being perceived as that country only lives in war. That's the only thing we see.
Yeah, I get where you're trying to go. Yeah, I can say it with like the Turkish people here, how there is a certain like political party that really wants the Turkish people out because according to them, the Turkish people are not working and they're just leeching off the state. And this gets imprinted into young children, and then these children become really racist from a very young age. And you know, it's like a racism game that goes on even in schools, where, for example, not limiting it just to Austrian children or people, but for example, where Austrian children people are really nasty towards Turkish people or other nations based on, for example, being imprinted that through that certain political party. And instead of really understanding why are the Turkish people like they are, you know, what's behind it, and realizing that they are really poor, that they, for example, did not get enough support in learning the German language back then that they came here, or certain people that came from need, which is, for example, good German skills. I mean, they didn't get supported very well in that. They kind of were left alone in this country when they just entered from the war, and you know, fight for yourself, so to speak. And
oh wow, that's a very cool. I understand, Alin. Like, if you don't dig enough, then you just get what the media wants you to know, and that's good enough for them to control what we think and the decisions we take and where we vote. Right. That's a very cool example.
It's just the surface, kind of. You see just the surface, the end result, but you don't really see where did it start, the starting point. What's the reason behind it, you know?
Yeah, and I will now actually have a look at Marlon's question because I can see that it actually relates to this point, but now bringing it back to ourselves. So I will have Michelle answering to this one. And Marlon says, so how did your own Truman experience, when you discovered everything that you are has in fact been a pre-programmed script, a role in the stage of a reality. So, Michelle, how did you first react when you saw what was actually the show about, and how did you decide to walk through it in terms of your the pre-programmed script that you see in the movie, for example?
Like how I walked through the show?
Sorry, your own Truman experience, like bringing it back to yourself as if you were Truman, but as we are in our own minds.
Oh yeah, okay. Well, it's kind of funny how my process started out, because I kind of took like a positive approach, like, oh, this isn't real and things like that. But it wasn't real in the fact that you know, oh, this isn't like how it really is and things like that. But then I realized, whoa, you know, I have to change though, like, or it's just going to continue to be the same. And so with Truman, that's what his world was. It just continued to be the same thing, in and out, day in, day out. And with so for me, basically how I started to walk was just questioning myself, questioning the world. I never read the news. I mean, I really didn't even educate myself really on what was going on in the world through reading newspapers. But then when I joined Destiny and I started to participate and started to add other Destonians on my Facebook, I started to see like the news feed being all, you know, on news articles and what's going on, and I actually reacted because I thought it was really negative, but really it really brought perspective on what really is going on in this world, really seeing the evils, the negativity that's really existing within us and also in this world. So yeah, at first I did react to such things, but I mean, but I didn't allow myself to like shut it down or to, you know, ban that. And that really helped me actually learn more about the world. And now I try to, when I have time, to, you know, read the news and see. And also reading the news is good practice for me to test my reactions too.
Yeah, that's a cool thing, and I'm glad that you didn't push yourself back when you realized those things. I noticed that this pre-programmed script was like, suddenly I realized that there are certain things in my life that that I would think, oh, I am blessed, or like when you're religious, you kind of think, oh, the acts of God, oh, and then you kind of like, oh, wait a second, I have been creating this mess all along, so so there's no one else to blame apart from me facing the consequences and walking. And that is a process that I'm walking in. I also remember to go through the point of being also positive, to try to avoid looking at the details, and eventually you kind of start. And I remember that I cried a lot while writing, and it still happens when there is this massive point that I am facing, and then I realize that it has to be deconstructed, and it is, and then you see that your life was all based in that self-definition, and you were living on that script all along until you're like, no, that's too much. This is not what I want, and there's too much energy of like physical going into that, and it's not going to take me anywhere. So thanks very much, Marlon, for that comment. It's a very important takeaway. So whoever watches the Truman, to look at the own experience. Aldin, we are now like almost 10 minutes to go. Would you like to tell us as well, how did you react when you realized that there is this pre-programmed script that you have been playing this role in our life as your own?
Yes. Yes. It's interesting because I took a two-way approach to the whole thing. First, realizing that, you know, oh man, I'm like controlled, everything is like not right and stuff like that. Oh my God, and going into depression. But on the other way, I was like very grateful and kind of like really enjoying walking the process just by realizing, hey, I have that actual power and tool right now to change whatever needs to be changed in me, whatever I don't like, whatever needs, and to create my life the way I would actually like it for myself or for anybody else, so that I can switch roles comfortably with another person, like without hesitating. You know, if I would have to change with person X, for example, I wouldn't go, oh, not really, but of course, gladly, you know, because it's that high standard of living and life.
Sorry, I didn't follow you. What were you saying now? That it was the highest standard of life? Sorry?
With the point of switching roles, you know, how I said, like, you can create, with having the tools and having that power of responsibility, you can create, now you can actually live the life you want. You can create it for yourself, and to have that life for everybody else and have that access for everybody else, so that in the end you can comfortably say, yes, I would change my life or my role with another person, knowing that they have that highest standard of living in life as well.
Oh, I see. I see what you mean now. Okay, gotcha. Okay, so that's really cool. Basically, like, your process allowed you to not only look at yourself, but look at people around you, which maybe before you didn't really care.
Right, exactly. And I said, like, that initial approach, when you face the reality and you see your role, you may tend to go into a depression, especially if you come from a positive background, because you have a higher resistance facing walking through positive things than negative if you come from a negative background. And realizing that you have that power right now to change, and that you can actually enjoy the process as well, is what supported me a lot, to simultaneously walk through the depression while realizing everything was not all right.
Okay, yeah, because actually a depression is just going to feed the point even further. It's just another energetic experience that we put ourselves in. So that's a cool reminder here today. And just now we are almost approaching the end. I will remind everyone watching that you can still send us questions. And at some point in the movie, there is this interview with the actual producer of the Truman Show, and he says that Truman can leave at any time. That's what he says. That's what his belief, thinking. I'm not doing, and I'm not going through any wrongdoing. He can leave. Well, now bringing back to ourselves, our lives, if we didn't have the tools of destiny, if we were never introduced to self-honesty and to integrity and to the principles of best for all and give as you like to receive, are we actually that free to, like, suddenly free ourselves from our minds? Michelle, what are your thoughts on that?
I don't think so. Because if we didn't know the tools, we'd still be controlled by our emotions and feelings. We wouldn't really understand what was going on. We'd have these internal conflicts. I mean, I'm not saying I don't have them, but I do know how to work through them. And so that's why I think that walking the Destiny Eye process is really, like, cool and self-empowering and important, because we get to basically choose, like, who we want to be. Like, we get to decide who we want to be, and otherwise we're just going to let the mind take over and direct us, whereas we can actually direct ourselves and create a life, you know, best for us and best for all.
Yep, and what you said is really how it happens, because when we apply self-forgiveness, we say, I forgive myself for what I have accepted and allowed myself to believe, to perceive, to do, to define. And it's actually all those acceptances and allowances that construct our minds. And there's so much information around us that if we don't actually stop and look at where this allowance came from, for me to leave it out, to speak certain things because I have accepted as myself. And it's funny because this movie is very specific, and when I was looking at it, like watching it more into detail, in the same interview, the producer of the Truman Show is asked why Truman had never come close to discover the true nature of this world, to which the producer answers, "We accept the reality of the world with which we are presented." Isn't this so specific, Aldin?
Yes, I agree. See if I
Like,
can add a point.
sure, I can basically like in terms of the life you have, you will look at the world outside. If it's so superficial, you're gonna accept yourself as that superficiality, right?
Right.
Like these kind of things, it makes us consider like if this is how the world, aren't we a manifestation of that?
Right, like an internal, external, like reflection.
Absolutely, like a mirror, meaning that if we actually want to change how this world exists, like in terms of being more meaningful and more transparent and honest, then we know where we must start.
Right.
Cool. Michelle, would you like to add anything to it from your own process?
Just agree. I'm with you because I know that when I also first started my process, I started to observe people in the world and how people were interacting. And then as I started to read more of the material, I realized I have to change first. I actually have to stand and be an example for others to show another way of living.
Yeah. And then
Right.
eventually your world starts coming out. Like as Aldin was saying, once he just realizes that being antisocial was not supporting him, then he knew what he had to do, and then he changed his life, and now you guys are together, for example.
Right.
Yeah, I know. Alden's really changed since I first met him. So yeah.
Very cool.
The process worked. Real change in him.
And now, just to finalize the session tonight, we have a final question here. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so it is from Andres Philip Tendro, and he says in the end of the movie, the corrupt world creator mentioned that in this world they can't feel fear, but Truman went through the door of fear. Why would you say that it is necessary to go through these doors of fear? Who wants to pick this one up?
Well, I can go. I would say you need to go through the door of fear because your mind is first of all constructed based on pure fear, I'd say, from my understanding. And to find out the truth, you have to walk through what your mind is actually based on. Otherwise, you will always be contained in or in this space of conformity that you know that you have been brought up in, so to speak, by the mind. And to find out the truth, you have to step through these things, and these things are the fear, for example. And in Truman's case, the world where they didn't feel fear, according to the creator, was a constructed and scripted world where everything was, laid out to the perfect, minute detail to create that eventual happiness. And it was secluded from, like in this half like bubble, metal bubble from the real world, where a lot of, excuse my expression, crap goes on, from wars to starvation and so on and so forth. And stepping through that fear is actually stepping beyond and through the door of the self-created positive illusion, so to speak, and entering what the world really is and how it really is. And then through that, because you need that in order, you need to understand how things really work and why they exist in order to find ways or to understand what needs to be done to change it. Because if you just keep in this positive bubble, you're separate from the real life or what's really going on in the world. So how can you change that?
Yeah, and it's funny because it also definition of fear. Like for the producer, he thought that he can't feel fear because there was nothing there that could cause him the fear. Like he wouldn't die of a plane crash or anything because he wouldn't fly. So this
Right.
is the kind of fear that the producer defined. That at the same time, Truman was going through this internal conflict of a lot of, like, he was feeling probably alone, and suddenly he didn't realize how come there's all patterns of movements, like my life is always the same, and so that created a fear that was unknown to the producer, like, so even the god was not expecting him to behave in a certain way. And that is interesting to see how we have to challenge our own mind from what we believe we know, and the fears we have.
Agree.
Michelle, would you like to go for it, Michelle?
Sure. Just wanted to add, yeah, we get to really see who we are as we push through those fears. There's a lot that we haven't yet discovered about ourselves. So, yeah. Interesting to see who you can become once you walk and push through fears.
Very cool. Thank you, Andres, for your question. So guys, we are now reaching the hour. So I would like to thank you very much for this very helpful hangout. I really enjoyed myself and your presence, and I think it was very supportive at many levels. And do you like to say anything before we finish?
I just want to add on the last point where the door of fear is like that. The fear is like a doorkeeper keeping us like in the self-created comfort bubble, so to speak, to not face what we actually have created and allowed life and ourselves to become.
Great point. Michelle, go ahead.
Just want to say I really enjoyed the hangout too. So yeah, really cool support here.
Same, agree.
Cool, guys. Thank you. So we'll be back next week with a new movie. Victor is currently on holiday, so I will cover the next one. And that's all from us tonight. And as we discuss the Truman Show, in case I don't see you, good afternoon and good night. Bye-bye.
Bye, guys.
Bye.